Hey, good afternoon, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get things kicked off here. I am Mark Johnson with McKinstry and the president of the SafeBuild Washington board. Thank you for joining us today. One quick point of housekeeping. Please ensure that you stay muted throughout this kind of presentation so there's not a lot of background noise. So again, thank you for joining us today. We have members and non-members alike. If you're not familiar with SafeBuild, our vision is to build zero incidents through collaboration. And so we do that by coming together in meetings like this where we can share best practices and work to continually improve as an industry. If you're not currently a SafeBuild member, we would ask that you please consider joining. You can join through our website or feel free to reach out to one of the board members. Today we're going to be discussing a topic that's probably on the forefront of everyone's minds. Obviously, in the COVID-19 era, there are lots of new, regulations, requirements, things we are trying to do to keep our people as safe as possible. We have several guest speakers lined up to share their perspectives on best practices in this time. Special thanks to Mindy Uber of Skanska and Jeff Angeli of UW Facilities for their leadership in bringing this team together. So again, please mute your microphone, and we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Dave Johnson. Dave is the moderator for today. He's also SafeBuild's treasurer, and so Dave, take it away. Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks, Mark. These are really unique and challenging times in our industry, and all of us are learning as we go to adapt to these new regulations and how we keep workers safe. So we thought this would be a good opportunity to share what people are doing around the industry so we can all get through this and navigate these uncharted waters. So we've got a few panelists together, and we're going to talk about how they're addressing some of the new requirements in a COVID world. So with that, we're going to begin with an owner's perspective on COVID plan reviews. And to present, we have Jeff Angeli and Steve Tadgy from University of Washington and Tim Ogden with PBS. So with that, go right ahead.
All right. Hello, everyone. This is Steve Tadgy from the UW. I'm the executive director of the project delivery group. I'll let Jeff and Tim introduce themselves in a moment. So just to tee us off, if you could go to the next slide, please. There we go. So like all of us, we're trying to figure out what all of the various guidance and proclamations from the governor's office and other public entities mean for our work. And I think all of our practices have stemmed from the marching orders that came to us from our leader in UW Facilities. And I think, really up through the president of the university. And that is, our first priority is to flatten the curve in our society to keep people safe. But also, number 3 is to be as productive as possible. And so I think from the start, we have tried to figure out how to thread the needle and do all of these things while compromising the first 2 as little or not at all, while maximizing number 3 as best we could. Next slide. So I'll let Jeff and Tim take it from here.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jeff Angeli. I'm the Director for Construction Operations, and I lead the safety program and the transition to occupancy program here at the University of Washington. First things that we were doing, like everybody else, like all our contracted partners, is trying to assess the declarations that were happening in sort of real time, day by day, and understand what they meant for our projects, which sectors our projects were in, any exceptions to the rules and how we would move forward, what were the criteria that we needed to get in place on our projects to ensure those things that Steve had mentioned about flattening the curve and keeping people safe. And of course, to do that, there's communication is key. Lots of communication, lots of conversations, lots of comparing of notes, trying to learn how to be effective together to build sort of what I'll call a force for sharing and networking around this, picking up the phone and talking to others to see how they were interpreting or assessing the criteria, and then pulling in subject matter experts in industrial hygiene, both as third-party consultants like Tim from PBS, but also in-house from our own university's Environmental Health and Safety Office and the other embedded safety folks that work inside the different business lines, and try to partner in together to ensure that we all succeed. You can go to the next slide, please. And, trying to be very transparent about the efforts and asking our partners on our 26 projects that are still in motion if they were, comfortable with us sharing the information that they were generating on their projects and our review of that information in very transparent ways, and sort of creating a open, standard library, so to speak, of the practices on campus, and promoting the best practices that we were seeing, again, to try to up the community IQ around this. It's all new to everybody working on campus. We have some projects with infection control requirements, but this was even different than those. And all firms and even individuals are reacting different during these stressful times. So trying to be flexible, patient, and to try to help. You can go to the next slide, please. And, I think actually this is Tim's slide, so I'll stop there.
Thanks, Jeff. This is Tim Ogden with PBS Engineering and Environmental, and we've worked with you for pushing 20 plus years at this point, and it's been a very rewarding and challenging effort over the last coming up on 4 weeks, I believe. And our role has been to provide technical assistance on the industrial hygiene and health and safety front to Jeff and Steve and all of their folks, and then all of the partners on the construction projects that we're addressing. And we really see ourselves as facilitators and assistants more so than any kind of adjudicators or approval bodies. And throughout this whole process, it's become kind of clear. One way I look at it is that what we're really trying to do is change habits, and they're not bad habits. They're different habits that we're trying to achieve. And so we've talked a lot with our folks about stepping out of what can be a typical role and avoiding judgment, and just realizing that we're asking for people who already do a fantastic job of staying safe and very diligent about that to modify extremely ingrained behaviors. And therein lies a lot of the challenge. And we're trying to keep it on the forefront that we're supporting individuals in the field through this process. And the challenge that we face is that where we would typically be reviewing and processing this information that we're handling, the site-specific safety plans based on promulgated regulations, established, very detailed scripts. We're currently working on a very dynamic potluck of guidance and different document sources, to the effect that they changed again today slightly, or at least were amended. And so what we really are trying to do is gather everything up, look at the plans and see if everybody's got the components at least in play, and then go through them to see if they are the right components and if they contain the right language and they communicate the right message. And a very important part of that, when you're looking at large-scale site-specific safety plans of hundreds of pages and guidance documents that are inserted and various parts that may not be completely unified, the organization is extremely critical to communicating the information. And that gets to the ultimate test, is what's going to be communicated to the people out in the field. If we are having trouble understanding it as a team, as a group of partners, it's going to be very difficult for the people out there trying to do their job to understand it. So that's kind of our throughput approach. Next slide, please. So as you're all probably very aware, Friday was an interesting drop of information, and we've been working very diligently to try to stay up to speed on it and get all the information out there that we can to help people digest it and modify plans that they've already had a lot of time into, and we're in various stages of review and adoption. And so there's a number of things that really are important to look at with these phase 1 requirements, and Jeff and Steve and I and our teams have been working diligently to get some information out there to folks. There was some information that came out today, without going down a rabbit hole, which is very difficult these days, that just clarified what projects are authorized and so on and so forth. The less than 6 foot distance component is a challenging one. There's some very complex cross-referential information that applies to it. And I think as the situation evolves, people may look at that as not necessarily something to try to achieve, but maybe something to avoid in the ultimate goal to just to stay safe. And the PPE is another tricky matrix to navigate. And so ultimately, I think it's a good intention to try to default to the most simple and safe approach, depending upon the very dynamic on-site operations. And on that front, PBS is out visiting job sites, again, in our role as facilitators and assistants, and really just trying to look for those habits that normally would be completely perfect, but now may be problematic, and trying to help people that are going through their daily routine to maybe stop and think about that and adjust slightly so that they can be more safe in this dynamic environment. There's a number of other components that we're trying to get as much information out there for folks, and I would offer that we're open for questions. We've gotten some from people, but PBS is ready and willing to chat with you to see what you're up against and try to help figure out a positive path forward. So thank you all.
I did want to mention one last thing, that folks can check the UW facilities website and find there are different communications on the various declarations and amendments. And also you can view all of the library of Project COVID-19 plans is accessible from our website. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks for that. It's great information as we navigate these uncharted waters. Our next presenter is Stacy Jellison with Skanska, and they're going to discuss the site logistics for work performed in this new current environment.
Hi, my name is Stacy Jellison. I am an environmental health and safety manager with Skanska. I've been working with Skanska for a long time, and this is one of the most challenging things that I've had to go through. You know, near the end of March, we shut down most of our sites in Seattle following Governor Inslee's stay home, stay healthy order. And that took a lot of effort for us to shut down the project. We had to make sure that they were all buttoned up and safed off so that they could be secure. We were anticipating weeks or months possibly of being off. And shortly thereafter, we received notice from several clients that our sites were going to be considered essential businesses. So we were asked to reopen several sites. We knew this was going to be a major upheaval for craft workers, and that we needed to be strategic with how we restarted our project. And we also wanted to be consistent and clear with our directions amongst our projects, so that when people came to a Skanska site, they saw the same thing everywhere. So we started developing a protocol to restart our sites, and we quickly realized that site logistics was going to be a major concern. So that's what I want to talk about today. Specifically, the site logistics changes for COVID-19 mostly fell into three main categories. That would be site access, hygiene, and communication. So on this first slide, you can see that site access was one of the first aspects that we considered. Going into this, we knew that we wanted temperature checks for every entrant. And in order to do that, to make sure that we captured everyone as they came through, we decided that we needed to control the point of access to the site. So we created a single point of entry on all of our sites in whichever way was feasible for each site. That meant closing down entrances on the opposite side of the campus, make sure that we know who's coming on site at all times through one single point. And at that point, we set up our temperature check stations, and you can see in the photos above the COVID-19 safety precautions for temperature check that we developed. And you can see a picture of our medic, our EMT, scanning an individual as they enter the site. You can also see how we set up the queue as people came in to maintain social distancing as the workers entered. What we were really doing at the entrance was setting the tone for the project. You know, the gate is the first thing that people see as they enter the project. And we had workers that were returning from being at home, and we had workers that were very concerned about the health implications of returning to our site. So it was our first chance to really put forth an attitude of concern and professionalism for our workers so that they could see that we were taking this seriously and we were doing everything we could to keep them safe. We also understood that it was important for us to apply the rules universally. You know, if we were going to ask workers to come on site and to wear specific PPE, to go through temperature checks and to answer questions, then we all needed to do it. And that meant everybody on the staff, regardless of their positions, we had to account for everyone that came through. And we didn't anticipate it being as many extra people that are on the site. We're talking about truck drivers, inspectors, visitors, vendors. We had about 20% extra people than we anticipated from our typical workforce. One of the main points of the site access entry procedure was that we wanted to give clear instructions on what was expected from workers. So you can see in the signs, we were letting them know what we expected. We also wanted to make sure that we had visible leadership at the gate. Every morning since we've restarted, and it's been near a month now, our project managers, superintendents, EHS managers have all been at the gates greeting people as they come in, just to let them know that, hey, we're here on the same team with you and we're all in this together. Next slide, please. Once the workers enter the site, the focus of COVID-19 prevention shifts to hygiene. It was important to us that we establish a protocol for cleaning the sites. So what we did is we assigned a dedicated cleaner on each one of our sites to constantly, continuously clean high-touch areas, such as the outhouses, doorknobs, railings, anywhere that people could accumulate in an area. We also had them use the no-touch disinfectant spray. That way the cleaner themselves wouldn't be exposed to COVID-19. They could spray it and walk away and let the disinfectant do its work. We also decided that it was important to clean our area before we returned to the site. So we hired a third-party company to come in, and they were CDC trained on cleaning and disinfecting sites. And we had them clean all of our office areas and crew space, just so that we could start out at a base level and have everyone know that we were starting out clean. We increased our facilities on site. We doubled the amount of portable toilets on most of our sites to make sure that we had enough, and we spaced them out 6 feet apart from each other, as you can see in that top photo. We also increased the cleaning schedule to 3 times a week, and I will tell you, these are some of the cleanest portable toilets you will ever see on any job site. We added hand wash stations that previously weren't on site with running water and soap, and also lots of hand sanitizing stations. We added extra crew shacks and trailers to the site because we realized that people were eating lunch in small areas that they needed to be able to spread out. You can see that "Eat Here" sign that we actually positioned people in a place where they could feasibly stay 6 feet apart from each other. The other picture you see there is a picture of some standard PPE that we developed. You know, Tim, when he was speaking just now, said habits. I think that was a really good way to say it. We found that what we're having to do is rewire people's muscle memory on job sites. They've spent their entire career doing things a certain way. And in order to maintain 6 feet of social distance and in order to work with these new PPE on, there's been a lot of hurdles psychologically and physically for this. So it's a work in progress, but we're committed to keeping everybody safe. Next slide, please. For the workers to be able to understand what was expected of them, we needed to clearly communicate our expectations. So we put up a lot of signs all over the site to make everything clear for what we wanted. These signs we felt were important that they were professionally designed. We used our in-house design team at Skanska Seattle to design basically an ad campaign for COVID-19 using clear language and visuals that were standardized that we would see on every job site. We added a lot of wayfinding signs to make sure that people could navigate through the site, especially in areas that were choke points where lots of people congregate. The signs also included a lot of social distancing reminders and then just simple phrases like wash your hands, stay 6 feet apart, cover your cough, all to just keep it front of mind for every worker on site that this is not a business as usual. We found that the gatherings on site needed to change. You know, we at Skanska, our orientations are important to us. Every person that comes on site, we do a site orientation. Sometimes those orientations are very large groups packed into a conference room. And we realized that wasn't going to be feasible with COVID-19. So we tried to find ways where we could spread people out and get them into the rooms and maybe limit attendance to meetings. And if that meant adding additional orientations throughout the day. I even went so far as personally to hold meetings outside where we could be in the open air and when there was a large group, which was difficult, but it was manageable. Stretch and flex was an important point for us to figure out. Stretch and flex is where we communicate daily the hazards that people are going to face, and we couldn't have 150 people in one spot at once, so we went to more of a toolbox talk method where we communicate to the subcontractor leadership the day's activities, and then they go to their teams and stretch and communicate with their own teams. And so far, it's been working fairly well. In conclusion, I just wanted to let everyone know that this has been tough, but by focusing on site access, hygiene, and communications, we've really been able to maintain a sense of calm and order on our sites and create a team atmosphere where it's all of us working together. And we've been able to, for the most part, achieve buy-in from the subcontractor partners and let people know that we're trying our best to keep everyone safe in a transparent manner. And as we get information, we pass it along to them. And now we're planning on opening up many more sites in the near future. So we've developed a smart restart guide to share best practices regionally and nationally within Skanska. And just like the folks at UW said, if you're interested in more information on that, you can contact us and we will be happy to share any best practices that we have. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Stacy. Appreciate that. There's a lot of good information there that we can all use on our job site. So now we're going to move on to one of the innovations that one of our members, Hermanson, has put together, which are hand washing stations that they can add to your job site. So Troy and Ken, can you go through some of your hand washing stations, please?
Sure, you bet. Yeah, thank you for having us. You can go ahead and go to the next slide here, probably too. Yeah, Troy didn't make it with us today. I'm Ken Dykman. I'm the better looking picture of the two there. So I'm down in Oregon actually, but I wanted to talk about something relatively simple. Gosh, I sure commend the last two presenters. Especially at UW trying to navigate through all of the the amount of information out there that's somewhat conflicting too between, you know, OSHA and CDC and LNI and local state governments and so forth. We're all trying to do our best. And what I want to share, won't take too long, is something that's relatively simple. Everyone agrees on, you know, that washing with soap and water does a pretty good job to combat the spread of COVID-19, especially hot water. And certainly, you know, you can't get these portable stations online anymore. They were available for a while, but you just can't find them, just kind of like Clorox wipes or toilet paper or anything else nowadays. But certainly hot water is really difficult to provide. And so, you know, there's a few companies out there making these sinks here, even with hot water. And that's, you know, anywhere you can get a sink with hot water that's portable will be great for the guys out in the field. We wanted to do something, you can go ahead and go to the next slide there. We wanted to do something that was ultra portable, that would, you know, as we were looking to see how can we support the guys at a specific, not just at a project level, but strictly at the work zone level, at their break area. You know, how do we make something that is, you know, super convenient to move on site and to relocate if need be and so forth. And so we started with just a, you know, a Rubbermaid cart. And in fact, some of these are, you know, repurposed, you know, some of them are used, some of the ones that we have, they don't look like much, but that really adds to the portability of them and just the size, the, you know, on casters and the weight of them. We've found that these, when they're fully built and put together, you know, one person can lift them up into a truck and motorcycle strap them down. They're less than 100 pounds. So we really wanted to try to find something that we could contribute to the workers to keep them safe, that at a reasonable, you know, affordable cost. Pretty much we just do these things at cost just to try to help out, you know, our fellow community members here, whether it be the workers or the public, whoever uses these. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And so here's how small some of these things are. You know, again, there's other models out there of bigger stations for higher volume. Again, we just wanted to try to have something that was easy to connect to and, you know, easy to move into break areas, easy to put into their work areas and so forth. We have, we started off trying to make it like the Model T and just, you know, limit the options available to try to get these out, you know, in a hurry to people, you know, like the Model T, you know, you can have any color you want as long as it's black, right? But then we realized that there are a lot of options on the site as far as voltages and demand and so forth. So, you know, if you go to the next slide, we have, we had a little flyer to be able to offer people anything to basically adapt to that project site from a volume standpoint, capacity and voltage standpoint. A couple of the things that we learned when we made these, you know, it would seem to make sense to make them hands-free, and so we started off with hands-free devices, the paper towels, the faucets and so forth. We learned really quickly though, with the workers' high vest clothing, that those things trip the little sensors from quite a long distance away, actually. And so we'd find the towels, you know, unrolled down to the ground basically. And so our preferred model, and I think others probably too, is, you know, manual wrist blade faucets and, you know, manual paper towels, just because that seems to work better and not as fidgety as the auto hands-free devices that way. So, you know, we've been making these things with a, like I say, with the hot water tank. Our preferred model is with a little 2.5 gallon. That's okay. Go ahead and advance it. Yeah, thanks, Jason. Our preferred model is a you know 2.5 gallon tank that can hold enough hot water for, you know, quite a bit of volume. The next jump up is a 208 one. Again, that's a little bit harder to run a cord to, but wanted to make it easy to connect a garden hose to, and then you can connect like a RV, basically a waste hose, to a storm sewer, essentially. You know, a couple of other little lessons learned here for us was whether or not we should note that this was, you know, non-potable water, and got some feedback that, well, if we put non-potable water on there, you know, people may not use it because they might think that it's dirty water. It's not. It comes from, you know, a hose bib, and most hose bibs are protected with a backflow preventer. We do have a vacuum breaker on these too anyway, so it really is potable. It's made from lead-free, you know, solder. So it's interesting trying to just kind of work through some of those logistics. But again, I think we've seen quite a bit of success with the use of these. Gosh, we've made a couple of hundred of these things now. And again, the idea is just to get them into the places where people will use them. You know, lobbies of buildings or right out front of buildings, in the job sites where the actual workers are, and just really make them ultra portable. Little picture on the right, you can see that cart was probably repurposed. And, you know, like I say, it's these things aren't the prettiest, but like I say, they're not meant to be pretty. They're meant to be functional and easy to put into the place where they can be used. Let's see, next slide. Oh, and I think that's it. So yeah, I just, anyway, that's one of the things that we're doing to basically help out the industry and support, you know, the efforts of the guys in the field at a project level. So appreciate the opportunity.
Great, thanks, Ken. Appreciate that. So our next thing that we're going to talk about, we have some examples that folks have been, as we've been working through these new times, some examples of work practices that folks have developed to try and accommodate social distancing. So to start with, we're going to start with Brian McMuldren from WPI, then Mindy Uber from Skanska will talk about some of their practices, and then I'll show a few of the things that we've developed as well. So with that, I'll let Brian take over.
Hi there. My name is Brian McMuldren. I'm with WPI. Hope everybody's having a fine Wednesday afternoon. What we've come up with, which was actually an idea from one of our field crews that had some install to do where they were having to get within 6 foot of each other, is a plexiglass lift barrier. Crew had to install some panels on a building and was having trouble maintaining the 6 foot social distancing. And their question to our safety department and management was, if this works in a grocery store, why can't we use it in the lift? So we researched the idea. You'll see this first picture, barriers in the closed position, dividing the lift off. You do have to set it to one side of the control panel so that you can keep your operator completely separated from the second worker. And when we contacted OSHA consultation in multiple states, what they told us is it just needs to be full height, full width, just has to provide full coverage between the workers. So we made sure it goes all the way down to the floor and goes full width of the lift. If you note in this picture on the front rail, top rail, there's 2 pinch clamps, and that's what we use to hold the barrier closed. Keeping it very simple. That was part of our design theme on this, is it had to be simple. Next slide, please. This slide, you'll see the barrier in the open position. On the top rail, you can see the clamps have been moved apart. You'll also note when we swing the barrier open, it protects the control panel from the second worker. So as the second worker is entering and exiting the basket, they don't have access to that control panel, which helps keep anything from getting on the control panel from the second worker. And again, keeping with simple design, the pinch clamps are the basic door stop, and then they secure it. Can I get the next slide, please? And then this final photo shows what we're using for hinges, which are just heavy duty zip ties. Again, we don't want anything that's permanently attached to the basket because we only need this for occasional operations. Zip ties let it be installed and removed really easy. keeps it super simple. Nothing that's hard to procure. The hardest thing to procure is the plexiglass because it's being used by multiple industries. But you could, if you can't find plexiglass, you could sandwich reinforced like 6 mil visqueen between the wood frame, because it just has to be non-permeable and washable. Again, we vetted this through OSHA in 4 different states, Oregon, Washington, Utah, and New Mexico via phone consultations, with the one caveat for Washington: you could not use this on the phase 1 projects. The essential projects that were allowed to continue, you could use this idea, but the phase 1, you have to maintain the 6-foot barrier, is our interpretation of that. And that's all I've got.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. This is Mindy Huber, Senior EHS Director for Skanska here in Seattle. It's a pleasure to share some of our best practices with the group. Us safety folks are always looking to better the industry, and no time like the present to be transparent with our partners, our competitors, our anyone in the industry who can help us out as this situation is evolving every day. I've been hosting informal weekly calls with other GC safety leads here in Seattle, just to share what are they doing, what are we seeing, what are we hearing, really just to help each other through this. So that's empowering, and it's also part of SafeBuild Alliance's mission, is to do exactly what we're doing here today and help each other out. So one of the benefits working for Skanska, it's a large company, so we have a lot of information to share nationally. Within our company, we've got a national library set up of best practices for this COVID-19 crisis. It is different in different regions of the country depending on the regulations, but a lot of the same rules apply with the social distancing. So what you're seeing now on the screen is a floor decal, similar to what you see in a grocery store, that can be moved around throughout a project site to help with the visual cues that Stacy talked about in the logistics section. And that's a lot of what we're sharing, is how to remind our crews what that 6-foot feels like, what it looks like, and what does that mean for the work they're doing every day. You can go to the next slide, please. I do want to thank our Portland team for a lot of the photos I'm sharing here today. Oregon has been under a mandatory 6-foot social distance rule as long as this COVID-19 crisis has been in place. So they have not been allowed at all to work within 6 feet. So we've learned a lot of good lessons from them. One of them is a simple visual cue of what 6 feet looks like. It's further than an arm's length, and it's a good, easy reminder here that they came up with one of those. The white dowel you see there is a hanger rod from Home Depot wrapped in vinyl. The red one is a 1x2, also picked up from the lumber yard or Home Depot. They use that with each crew. They give the stick to a crew member, and they can then plan their work accordingly and have that in the workspace. Where is everyone going to be positioned, and are they really keeping that that true 6-foot distance from each other? Next slide, please. And something we do most every day of the week at Skanska is pour concrete. Here's some pictures of what a socially distant concrete pour looks like. They developed some rakes with longer handles on them, allowing their workers to be more spaced out. They're doing smaller pours just like we are here to have more focus on the planning and realizing this is a different world we're living in, and the production rates and the practices we are used to in the past can't exist in this socially distant world we're in now. So it does take more diligent planning. Who's going to stand where? When are people going to move? It's almost an orchestrated dance. But we have been able across the country to successfully pour concrete while maintaining 6 feet of distance between everyone. Next slide. Here's another, just a simple solution. Cut the material in half. These are some precast stair treads. We got approval from the architect to do this. Now these treads can be handled easily by one person rather than needing 2 people. We've also seen this with sheetrock, cutting an 8 or 12 foot sheet in half. Normally would be handled by 2 workers, can now be handled by 1. I don't have pictures showing this, but we are looking at using a lot of mechanical assistance for installation, whether it's CMU block or glass panels, sheetrock on the ceilings. There's a lot of equipment out there. Nothing new, but just things that we don't necessarily use every day. There's hoists and jacks and miniature cranes that, again, allow the work to be done by a single person or a smaller crew. And I know I heard the operations manager in Portland say that, he just challenged the crews, what if your life depended on it? How would you do this task with that 6 feet of social distancing? And, our crews are incredibly creative and come up with all sorts of solutions every day. And we have to be outside that box with our thinking right now and find these solutions. And so far, we've been able to accomplish most of our tasks on our job sites. And then next slide, please. And we've been able to have a little fun with it as well. This is, again, a project down in Portland. Back to my earlier point about knowing how far 6 feet really is. This crew here set up just a contest. They put a marker out, and each person on the crew went and put their pin basically where they thought 6 feet was. And this was, early on in the new normal, just to give crews, again, that visual reminder. The closest, to the pin got a prize, and it, gave them a little break in the day, something fun to help them, conceptualize this social distancing requirement. We are also looking at making T-shirts with fun slogans on them. We've got some teams using badges with reminders, please stand back, keep your distance. We've got hard hat stickers. And again, it is a lot of logistics, a lot of visual cues that we're continuing to share. Like has been mentioned earlier, we are more than happy to share as we continue to learn. Please reach out. We're happy to pass on any of our ideas as they evolve. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Mindy. Appreciate that. So now we're going to have a few that best practices we've tried to implement on a few of our projects. So next slide. So first, signage is obviously key, and try and make sure that people are aware of that. And so we've got those posted up on fences inside of our job sites, and even on conference rooms or rooms where people might not have thought about how much space is available in that room. So just having some clear signage that delineates those things on the job site's been important to us. Next slide. Oh, go back one. And this is a kind of interesting one. One of our carpenters came up with, which is pretty cool. Obviously, touch points are one of those things that we're trying to either have to disinfect or keep clean on a regular basis. So we have some exterior doors into our some of our job sites that wood doors, and our carpenter came up with an idea of just making a foot pole. And so in this instance, just a simple couple 2x4 blocks with a piece of plywood across the top to allow someone to just operate a door or open a door with their foot. and then it has some bungee cords to allow the door to close automatically without someone having to touch it. So just another way to look at new ways that we can try and minimize the touching or touch zones that we might usually not even think about on a job site. Next slide. Obviously, Ken talked about sinks. This was one that we actually had made on a job site by the plumber on the site, just out of materials he could find. Probably not as efficient as the one that Ken showed being manufactured in the shop, but folks were just trying to do what they could to get improved hand wash sanitation on their job site. Next. And this was an interesting one. We have some very large job sites that have, large lunch tents or congregating spaces. And so obviously that's a place where it's very difficult to get away from social distancing. And so on these, we actually staggered shifts so we could limit the amount of people that are in the tent at one time, and also laid down red paper or red wrapping on the seats where you couldn't sit. So if you look on some of the tables on the very ends, on one side of the table, those are open. And then on the other side of the table, the middle section is open. So it provides, just a visual cue about, where you can sit and still maintain some sort of social distancing in those areas. Next. And then this is our one of our job sites where they're trying to, our concrete crews are installing a shoring post. And in this case, typically those two workers would be standing next to each other, essentially trying to raise that shoring post together, and that wouldn't allow the 6 foot distancing. So in this case, the workers have a tool, a jig that is using on the bottom to push the post up, and then as the post is secured with the worker up above and the worker below, and we need to get the it blocked up to the right height, the worker on the right is using a pole to push that block underneath the post, instead of getting up close like they might have before in the zone of that worker within the 6 feet of the worker. So, that was, again, another thing that just one of our carpenters came up as folks mentioned before. It's part of asking people, what would you do, again, if your life depended on something, or what would you do differently to make this happen? And our crews are really adept at coming up with unique and creative solutions once we give them the parameters and the goal of what we need to do. And so I think that's part of what we need to do these days, is to keep asking the questions. How do we do this differently? How do we do this better? How do we do this so that we can keep social distancing and, frankly, keep our jobs moving? If we can't keep that social distancing, sooner or later, folks are going to, shut our projects down. So putting that challenge to folks, I think people are doing a good job of being creative and coming up with interesting solutions to these challenging times. So that's what we have for our presentation today of the different elements. If there are questions, you can type them in the chat box if there are any questions on them, and we can try and respond to those throughout. So I give folks a minute or so if you have anything that came up during the conversation that you'd like to ask a question about. If you want to chat it, type it in the box, then we can look at that. And again, I appreciate everyone's participation in this because it is an ever-evolving thing, and we're learning new things every day about how to do this better. So we did get one question. will the recording be available at a later date? And yes, we are recording this, and the presentation and the recording will be on the SafeBuild Washington website. So it'll be available for folks to view if you didn't have a chance to, if you want to share that with folks outside of this. And I do, another question, which states are allowing construction with only 6-foot distancing? Good question. You know, Oregon, I think every state has a little bit of different, that's part of the challenge right now, is every state has a little bit different interpretation of how this works and have different takes on how, what they're allowing. And there's an interpretation to that as well. I think, and you can look at how strict each of those 6-foot distancing things are. I don't know that any state is currently prohibiting any work with 6 foot. Oregon is pretty strict in that it needs to do it as best as, you know, as best as possible. Probably a little bit more strict than Washington as far as the verbiage is. But it definitely makes all of our lives a little more challenging trying to interpret those. Another question about the cost of these actions and any discussion yet about how this will be shared between owner and contractor. Well, I think those are yet to be determined. There's a lot of different different efforts being put at this currently to understand what the ramifications of these are on projects. I think everyone understands that there's never a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow on most of our projects, and that the best thing that we can do on all of our projects is try and do these new practices in the least amount of cost as possible. And I think there'll be a lot of unfortunately, I'm sure there'll be some definite legal precedents that'll have to be set out of these new cases, trying to figure out how this new pandemic ends up affecting our industry. So don't have a really good answer for that other than it's yet to be told. So I guess any other questions that folks have? Leave it open for just a minute or two. And while we're doing that, I will say that make a plug for SafeBuild membership. We, if you aren't a member of SafeBuild, we would love to have you on board. We're a member-sponsored organization, and we can only provide content to the extent that people are supporting as members. So we would love your support if you aren't. And would also say that we would like to, our next membership meeting is currently scheduled for the October, but we would like to plan for another webinar in the next month or two if we can actually, if we have some good content that we can provide, and as regulations change, we will try to put out another webinar so that we can try and address any of these new things as they come out. Two additional questions. One for WPI, did the lift manufacturer approve the plexiglass barrier? Brian, can you answer that?
This is Brian. I don't know why you'd need lift manufacturer approval. We're not modifying the lift. It's no different than placing a paint sprayer in the lift, placing a bucket of paint in the lift.
Okay, appreciate that, Brian. And then another question, how has SDCI interpreted the various proclamations? To be honest, I don't have a good answer for that, unless any of our board members or teams have. I have not heard anything to date from folks? So I don't have a good answer for that one, Jeff. We'll research that and find out anything that we can share. Okay. There are no further questions. I would also like to make a plug for our annual golf tournament. We are still planning on holding our golf tournament. We understand Mr. Inslee's going to let us golf starting on the 5th of May. So hopefully that continues and we're able to do that. Our date is set for September 16th at Maplewood Golf Course, and we are open for sponsors. If you want to sponsor or buy a foursome for the event, that would be awesome. It's a great time. We had a great first event last year, and Race Whitson is our organizer of the golf tournament, and put on a great tourney last year. And we'd love to have folks join us again this year. And if you have you want to join or want to participate, please contact Race or Jason or Karen. That their information's on our website at SafeBuild Law. And additionally, we also have an opportunity for folks, if you want to have your organization on our website, we do have banner ads that are available. You can advertise on our website. They are just contact us with details of your business, and contact Jason at safebuildalliance.com with information, and we can get you signed up for a web page ad to sponsor. And finally, do want to again say that our next scheduled meeting is October 21st. Hopefully we're at a point where we can all get together and see each other's faces and join each other again by that point. But as I mentioned, we will have additional webinars that we'll schedule as we get information out and we're able to share things that are best practices or things that are changing within the industry. We want to become a resource for you to help navigate these interesting and challenging times. So if you have content or things that you have questions that about how things might be done or how we might incorporate some of the regulations, please contact us, and we'll be glad to try and address those in a future webinar. And then finally, SafeBuild is membership driven, so please consider joining SafeBuild on our website, safebuildlaw.com. And we would love to have you as part of our organization. And it is very interesting and challenging times. It's the best part of this organization is that we have a lot of folks that we can lean on to try and help us through and navigate. And we can collectively get better and be safer and navigate us through this COVID-19 time. So with that, I'm going to wrap up our webinar, and I really appreciate people for joining in, and hopefully it was helpful for you in trying to get some good best practice information about how to deal with this. And thank you for joining us, and we will be hopefully engaging with you soon, and hopefully in person soon. So thank you.